Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I gotta tell you, being an entrepreneur, I will not go through the rest of my career without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, Piracetam, Modafinil, Nupep, Uridine monophosphate. I mean, phenylpiracetam, forget it. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Episode number 60 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. I am your host, Ryan Michael Bello. We're going to do this one on oscillation dosing on kind of a continuum with Oxiracetam. And let me just break that down because it sounds like complex, but it's really pretty simple. Basically, with Oxiracetam, we're using Oxiracetam because that's a good example. I mean, it's a great example, frankly. It's one of the nootropics that this is applicable to. But it's also applicable to many other nootropics in that, like with nootropic compounds, they work on some of them work on a continuum. They sort of have long half-lives, and so even if they don't have long half-lives, they're making changes to neurochemistry that might last a little bit, that your brain sort of might get used to. So if you're going to use them on a continuum, like you basically just keep taking them every day for a couple months or something, like you're in college and you're really trying to get some good brain performance to study for exams or something, then there is a way to oscillate the doses from high or regular dose to even lower doses on sort of subsequent days after you've high dose on a lot of these things. And in some cases, you'll still get pretty substantially good brain performance not having the higher dose because you're taking it on a continuum and there's still some degree of chemical reaction in your brain going on in response to the nootropic dose you took the day before, right? A good example with that, that would be like with Oxiracetam, and a lot of folks that take it, they take a choline source with it, right? They're taking CDP choline or alpha GPC. Alpha GPC has a relatively long half-life, CDP choline a lot longer. And so there's the next day when they go to take their stack, they're probably not going to need as much CDP choline. This is where people run into side effects with that. And in some cases, they're not going to need as much Oxiracetam. Oxiracetam is a good example, forces the brain to use more acetylcholine in the hippocampus. So like you got the brain trying to sort of get used to, using extra acetylcholine to fire in the hippocampus and for the brain to be able to therefore engage in some of the activities around the hippocampus, which are memory, working memory, long-term memory, storing information in your memory specifically. So it sort of gets to a point where, you don't have to take the same dose every single day. So I want to talk about some practical strategies that folks can employ on Oxiracetam particularly, but I think this applies to other nootropics, so sort of think about it where you will and apply it where it makes sense. But first, look, everything at the Cortex Labs website, I got to keep pushing this so folks know. Folks keep saying, hey, we never got notified that there were specials. And by the way, if you want to get notified of everything that we have, that when it's on special, go to livecortex.com. There'll be a pop-up that offers to give you a free digital downloadable guide on nootropics. Put your email address in, and then we will notify you. Oh, and boy, we will. I mean, we send emails out at least 3 or 4 times a week saying, look, this is what's on sale. This is what you can get. This is what it costs. This is how much less it is. This is what it does, etc. It's all nootropic products. Nootropic stuff are nootropic stuff. But right now, 20% off everything. That's the Cortex stack, powerful pre-made stack, powerful nootropic stack, mental energy, motivation, speed of processing, verbal fluency. The Cortex stack basically demolishes all the other stacks out there in terms of efficacy and in terms of strength. It is powerful. You will not be let down because it is so substantially awesome. Cortex right now, 20% off at $27. Livecortex.com. Get a bottle, get 2. All of our digital guides are on sale as well. That's the Nootropics for the Business Professional. It is a digital guide that has just about 100 stacks of nootropic stacks that target business productivity. The Nupep Pro stack list, which is a giant list of Nupep stacks, oral, nasal, and sublingual Nupep stacks, highly effective stacks, digital guide. Smarter, Better, Faster, which is a digital nootropics guide that teaches you how to use nootropics, gives you my own personal stacks. The Racetam God Guide, which is another digital guide that teaches you everything about all the major racetams, gives you many stacks with all the racetams. Stacks you'll never see anywhere. I mean, you wouldn't believe the complexity and the awesomeness of these stacks. And then there is the Beginner's Guide to Aniracetam. That's pretty new and very popular. If you're new to Aniracetam, get that guide. It teaches you everything, gives you 25 powerful stacks, shows you what to stack it with, shows you what to cycle off of or onto when you cycle off of Aniracetam. Very powerful. The most popular product that's 20% off also right now is the Nootropic Starter Pack, okay? It's a bottle of Cortex and a digital copy is Smarter, Better, Faster, which is our digital guide teach you how to use nootropics, gives you many stacks. All right, that nootropic starter pack is killer. Get it all at livecortex.com. Everything, all that stuff that we just talked about, 20% off right now. Okay, so let's just quickly break down oxiracetam. Oxiracetam is one of the racetam nootropic compounds. Works on mildly stimulating AMPA receptors through some modulation of their, of the receptors of AMPA receptors. That provides a stimulatory response to the neurotransmitter glutamate. But the overarching thing, I think, in terms of functional benefit from oxiracetam is that it forces the brain to use more acetylcholine in the hippocampus, which is where you do a lot of your memory processing, particularly long-term memory processing. So there's a whole bunch of great stuff going on. Normally, the effects from oxiracetam are brain fluidity, just general brain fluidity, which tends to turn into verbal fluency for a lot of folks. Their brains just kind of work a lot better. Resuscitation from sleep deficit-induced brain fog, like when you don't sleep well, you wake up a couple times, dogs barking, neighbors are being loud, and you don't really truly get the good sleep, and you had a crappy night's sleep, and your memory's just not working as good the next day. Oxiracetam is one of those great nootropics that comes and fixes it. I've used it for the entire duration that I've been taking oxiracetam. I use it for that. I mean, that and for hardcore focus sessions where I need a quick burst of focus. It really allows folks to focus, right? For many people, it is a honing in type of focus, right? It's the kind of focus that you dream of, like laser focus. Everything gets cut on, you actually get the focus. So that's one of the other things that it does. But in addition, it really improves, for a lot of folks, me included, working memory, right? Whether it's just like little menial tasks that I'm doing, that's where I tend to notice it the most. I'm just like, wow, my memory's working better. I have some things in my memory that I'm able to hold. This is working a lot better, than it was without oxiracetam, and it's pretty darn awesome. So there's a spectrum effects you get with oxiracetam. What I found is that, just as an example to break this down specifically, is that on one day, if I wanted to take oxiracetam, I would take 700 milligrams oxiracetam, 300 milligrams choline bitartrate. Okay. The next day, I would take the same thing and get the same result, get pretty good substantial, brain performance, and all those things I just discussed would be better, and, that would be useful. But it seems to me, and this podcast, by the way, is based on my experience, 9.5 or so years just taking nootropics, working through all these processes, trying to figure it out, trying to look at it analytically rather than haphazardly, and then trying to devise and derive sort of logical methodologies from that, and that's what we put in our digital guide. It's the basis for all the advice that we give. One of the things that I found is that basically I just need to take less oxiracetam if I was taking it on a continuum. If I was just going to go, all right, for a month, I'm going to take oxiracetam, right? I'm going to basically take it every day. I'm not going to cycle. I'll cycle off after the month for a couple weeks just to give my brain a chance to get back to normal. You don't want to keep taking things. You truly want to cycle, I believe, everything. And so in this process, the best way that has worked for me is to oscillate the doses during that continuum. Okay, that's where we get this whole idea of oscillation dosing during a continuum. So an example of a good, set of oscillations over the course of 2 weeks would be, maybe the first week you take your 700 milligrams every day, right? Or 1,000 milligrams of oxiracetam every day, whatever your dose is. You take that every day for the first week. But the second week, like on day one of the second week, you start off slower and lower. You start off at somewhere like 400 milligrams oxiracetam. You bring in your choline source as usual, and then you go from there. And then maybe the next day you go back up to 700 milligrams or a gram of oxiracetam. You see how it affects you. You go from there. Then the day after that, or maybe even later on that day. I mean, the oscillation dosing really works on a day-to-day basis if you're taking nootropics twice in a day. It's one of the major highlights of it. Take 700 milligrams oxiracetam in the beginning of the day. You need some focus and benefit later on, but you take 400 milligrams oxiracetam instead of 700, and that's that extra bit that you needed. Somehow, oscillation dosing and pulsing the doses, just sort of in a 3 to 4 hour gap in between which you dose the oxiracetam, sort of engaged in some degree of buildup, whether you can call it a buildup or just some sort of response that accumulates in the brain, probably around cholinergic signaling and of course AMPA receptors, that then gives you a better benefit, like than as if you were to take 700 milligrams the second time around. That might actually be too much because, again, you've started this process of working on AMPA receptors and cholinergic signaling that if you take another of the same dose later on, for some people it'll be fine. For some people it'll be overstimulation, right? That's going to lead to side effects. Cholinergic signaling dysregulation is, like, I guess, a term I'm just making up that is in line with taking too many cholinergic nootropics is not a fun thing, right? The brain works the opposite of good when there's too much optimization of that system going on. So you don't want to do that. You kind of want to watch out for that. And so back to our example of sort of through the weekly continuum, maybe on like day 3, you go back to a gram of oxiracetam, right? And then day 4, you stick with 200 to 400 milligrams of oxiracetam. Day 5, you micro dose oxiracetam, 200 milligrams in the morning, 200 milligrams at 12 p.m., 200 milligrams at 3 p.m., 200 milligrams at 7 p.m. of oxiracetam, right? You take one large dose of a choline source in the morning to satisfy the choline needs, something like 500 milligrams choline by tartrate right in the morning. What I found is that this kind of dosing, oscillation dosing on a continuum, is one of the best ways to sustainably take nootropics. And I say that because a lot of people hit me up, via email and go like, hey, I've been taking nootropics for 3-4 years, but then like as of the last year, they've affected me differently. Not that they're not doing their job, but I feel like they're doing their job way too much and I don't need it. And so it's giving me side effects. And the reason I think that's happened is because folks fall in love with nootropics effects on them because they're not used to functioning so well. Once they start functioning well, it's like, I never want to go back. I know just what that's like. I've been through it. I had to force myself to cycle off so that I didn't run into tolerance and all these issues. But then what eventually happens when you take nootropics so long without break is you run into side effects. You just overtax the system. There's only so much optimization of the cholinergic system you can handle or need. You don't need it anymore after a while, I know folks who take nootropics, and some compounds are like that with me, where like, you take them for a certain period of time, they optimize a particular system, and then thereafter, that system's optimized for now. In 2 more years, when you need to go optimize it again, maybe think about that nootropic again. But in the meantime, you don't need any more of it. And so what folks often run into is side effects and or nootropic not working the way that it used to work for them. And that's because they're not doing oscillation dosing. And they're trying to take nootropics on a continuum, just on a continuous, in a continuous nature over a period of time that's like a year or 2 years or a month or whatever. But they're not thinking about how to take them in a way that taking them consistently is sustainable. And oscillation dosing in this sort of pattern is in my opinion, maybe the only way to do it, certainly one of the best ways to do it. Okay, so let's just break down something else as an example. Bringing in like something like uridine monophosphate. That's another great example of an oscillation dose kind of compound. Uridine, very powerful compound, converts a little bit to CDP choline, improves neurite outgrowth, increases dopamine receptor densities, does a whole bunch of great things. Very cool for the brain, necessary for brain development, neurogenesis. It's in baby's formula, mother's breast milk, right? So uridine stacked with a choline source. That's the basis for the Cortex nootropic stack, our premate stack. We figured out that we could stack uridine with CDP choline in very specific dose quantities, put a little bit of artichoke extract in there, and we'd have this like fully functional modafinil-like stack. It was like insane brain energy, insane verbal fluency motivation, speed of processing stack. But the thing about the Cortex stack, and even any stack that brings in CDP choline particularly, and especially in combination with uridine monophosphate, is that these compounds are so strong together. The synergy is basically incredible. That as an example, some folks that take the Cortex stack go, oh, I take 2 capsules on Monday, 2 capsules on Tuesday, but then by Wednesday my brain works so well. And this would make a lot of sense because CDP choline has a half-life of about 66 hours, so they're probably just experiencing a half-life of CDP choline in their brain. And the uridine half-life, I'm not quite sure exactly what that is, but it's significant. Plus, it also makes sort of long-term changes as far as I can tell in the brain. So they're experiencing benefits the next day. And it's like on day 3, I only take 1 cap of Cortex. And then I can actually skip a day of Cortex and my brain still works well. And then I can bring, 2 caps in or 1 cap in like Thursday or Friday or something. So that's a good example of uridine and CDP choline oscillating the doses so that you don't run into overstimulation of the systems because of the long half-lives and how effective the components are. Just like you wouldn't want to take a double dose of modafinil over the course of many days unless you've gotten so intolerant, or your tolerance is built up so much that it's like it doesn't even affect you anymore. I mean, I've actually talked to folks who they're taking 400 or 500 milligrams of modafinil throughout the day, spread out into different doses, doesn't even affect them anymore. Okay, so that's one of the good examples. You want to oscillate your doses. I think it's a good idea to oscillate your doses from the regular amount down to half that and maybe perhaps a little less, then sort of go through a pattern of working your way up back to the regular dose and then go back down to lower doses on the nootropic, and particularly if you're doing this on a continuum, a 1 month to 2 month to 3 month continuum where you want to sustainably take the nootropic, but you don't want side effects and you don't want to overtax the system and you don't want to run into tolerance. This is the best way to do it. Okay, oscillation dosing on a continuum is a smart, sustainable, responsible way to take nootropics, and that's what we're all about here. I hope that has been helpful. Thanks so much for listening. Check us on the web at livecortex.com, at livecortex.com/blog, giant blog for nootropics information. That's where this podcast, the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast, is. Facebook.com/Cortex Stacks. Lots of great information there. Lots of posting about nootropics, me posting stacks, everything you can think of. All of our products, again, 20% off. That is the Nootropic Starter Pack. Most powerful product there is. I mean, that thing is a killer. Get your Cortex, 1 bottle of the mighty Cortex stack, and Smarter, Better, Faster, which is a digital guide that is expert level, teaches you how to use nootropics, teaches you distinctions about nootropics you'll never find anywhere else, but gives you many powerful stacks. But that's not it. I mean, every other digital stack list we have is packed with nootropic stacks. The Racetam God Guide has 80 or so. The Nootropic Stacks for the Business Professional has about 100 stacks. The Beginner's Guide to Aniracetam has 25 stacks. The new Pet Pro stack list is around 30 or 40 stacks. Powerful nootropic stack lists at livecortex.com. These stacks turn every facet of brain function on. If you want to be the limitless guy, I don't want to sound like I'm hyperbole, but I mean, these are powerful stacks. Get our digital guides, get them at livecortex.com. Get a bottle of Cortex. Right now, that's $27. Powerful nootropic stack. 20% off everything right now at livecortex.com. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for being with me, and oscillate your doses, especially on your Oxiracetam. Talk to you next time.